Welcome to Remix Boulder Video Podcast. I'm Duane Duggan, and we have Trevor Bellows again. Thanks for being here again today, Trevor. We had Trevor, what is it now, maybe 3 months ago to talk about TRID. TRID is the new rules that the lenders are having to follow, and Trevor is the branch manager at Premier Lending here at Remix Boulder. So we've had a few months to deal with all these things, and how's it going in general?
It's going.
All right. No big problems, huh?
No big problems.
All right. So in order to carry on an intelligent conversation about TRID, let's define TRID. What does TRID stand for?
TILA RESPA Integrated Disclosure.
That gives me a headache right there. So a couple other vocabulary words we need to talk about is, well, there was HUD, and that's no more, and TIL, that's no more, right? And that equals what now?
So the HUD was a closing form lenders used at the closing table. Now we use a CD, closing disclosure.
All right, so as we talk here, we start talking in acronyms. CD is closing disclosure. And how about the good old GFE?
The GFE, the good faith estimate,
right,
and the TIL, both are gone. They've combined into what's called an LE, loan estimate.
Trevor, can you tell me what TRID was supposed to do for the consumer?
So October 3rd it was launched, and it was enacted to protect the buyer, the consumer. And primarily it's to get the buyer accurate figures, all the figures, as well as to get the final amount to come to closing with 3 days before closing. Buyers were coming to closing not knowing how much they needed to bring, so it's really helpful.
Did this all come about because of lender fraud and those type of issues during the recession, or what caused this to all come about?
I'd imagine that it's coming from lenders, just not disclosing all the fees, not giving the whole picture, making that lender look a lot more appetizing to the consumer. Wow, they're very competitive. And then you get to closing and there's surprises. So it's really to eliminate the surprise for the consumer.
So now that it's been in place for a few months, you as a lender have had to deal with the new regulations. Do you feel it's truly helped the consumer and protected them?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And so is this better or worse, do you think?
Boy, that's a broad question. It's better for the consumer. It's helping the consumer understand their fees a lot better. It's helping the consumer get to the closing more prepared. It's hard on the industry right now as we adjust to the changes.
Okay. So. It sounded like it's doing pretty good, though. I haven't heard too many horror stories. But one of the things you talked about is like the myths of TRID and the facts. So let's just talk about a few of those. One of your first myths was if there is a last-minute seller credit at the closing table, closing has to be delayed 3 days.
Nope.
Is that true or false?
That is a myth.
Okay.
You can have last-minute seller credits. You can bring those in. That's just fine, and we can change the closing disclosure in time.
Okay. And then one of the big rumors and myths as this got started was that it was definitely going to take 60 days to get a closing done under the new TRID rules, which everybody feared that at first, but in reality, what happened?
Right. So in reality, if a lender worked in a linear process where it was you originated the loan, then you processed the loan, then you underwrote the loan, and then you sent it to closing, that would take about 45 to 60 days on the new TRID regulation. Whereas if you're doing everything kind of at the same time, as soon as you originate the loan, you really start working with your underwriters, processors, and closers all the way in. So we can still close the loan in 30 days.
Okay. And another myth was you cannot redisclose a CD without causing a 3-day closing delay.
Right. So that was one of the bigger concerns, and the amount that the borrower needs to come to closing, everyone was worried can't change. We have to have the CD to the borrower 3 days before closing, but it can change, and the concern was that it couldn't. So,
okay. So I think both lenders, realtors, consumers, they're all starting to learn a little bit about what they can do to help. What comes to your mind with the experience you've had now over 3 months, the major things the parties involved can do to help make the transaction go smoother?
Right. So an agent can really help us in the front end. I've made a list of a few things. First is to have the agent's license number. Those now go on the CD, and at the closing, the agents, both sides of the transaction, we need their name, phone number and license number to put on the closing disclosure.
And why is that important? Because that was never the case for thousands of years before that. So
Right.
why did that become important now?
I think the direction we're heading is anyone that's licensed, that's involved in the transaction, needs to be transparent, and we need to have a way to do a background search, if you will, from the consumer standpoint,
Okay.
to understand who they're working with, who they've hired.
What else?
Counters, offers, amendments, seller credits, anything like that, anything that the agent is aware of or is in the works of, communicate with the lender, make sure the lender knows, okay, we do have a $500 seller credit coming, be prepared, and talk to the lender, hey, how would you like this amendment to look?
Okay. I noticed one of the things, just in personal experience, that we've moved up our walkthroughs prior to closing. In other words, in the past, we'd just do a walkthrough, make sure everything's okay, maybe 24, 48 hours before. But now if there's a problem, it's a little bit better. It helps you if it's how many days sooner.
Right, so we need to issue the closing disclosure 3 business days prior to the closing. And so any changes that need to occur on that can happen after it's been issued, but you want to issue an accurate one. You really want to make sure you're getting the consumer and all parties involved an accurate closing disclosure.
Okay.
So, yeah, that helps a lot.
So doing a little earlier walkthrough,
Yep.
and then maybe, it seems like we've already grown or evolved to a 2 walkthrough thing. One at
Right.
7 days and then maybe one 24 hours right before, that if some number had to change, you would catch it a little bit
Exactly.
earlier. I remember as TRID was getting going, one of the huge fears was HOAs causing a problem with inaccurate numbers and causing problems at the last minute. How's that gone?
Yeah, so that's a great one you bring up, is we have to, as the lender, we have to disclose all potential fees involved, regardless of who's paying it. It used to be we only disclosed the fees that the borrower was paying. Now we have to disclose the HOA capital transfer fee, or the, how many months you're collecting in HOA fees, insurance fees, etc. We have to disclose all of those. So regardless of who's paying it, seller or buyer, we need to make sure they're on there. So yeah, if the agent can let us know there is an HOA and here's what we know about it, that helps a lot.
And practically speaking, did that cause any delays, or did we have any fights between buyers and sellers because loan TRID issues caused a delay?
No, what it's created, and it's kind of ironic, is that if the lender doesn't disclose a fee that they should have known, and they have to disclose it within 3 days of becoming aware of the fee, then the lender has to pay it.
Okay, so like if you have a bunch of closings lined up and there was a forgotten $300 fee, it's possible that chain of closings could still happen if the lender picks that up, so
Right.
it doesn't have to be disclosed.
Right.
So,
Right, and so if there's a transfer fee that you did have in your contract,
okay,
and I didn't read through the contract and missed it, I have to pay for the transfer fee because it wasn't disclosed.
okay. And I know Premier Lending, since you and I first got together to talk about TRID, has had hundreds of closings. How many closings has the TRID issues caused a true problem with?
You know, it hasn't caused any problems from a timing standpoint. We're proud to say we haven't missed a single closing. Not one has been delayed either. So from that standpoint, we're doing well. What the heartache that we're seeing created is from the buyer standpoint, they have to receive that closing disclosure 3 days before closing, 3 business days. And if they don't, then you have to move the closing. There's not a, oh, I forgot to open my email. So the stress that you see is the closing disclosure is issued and the borrower's email doesn't work. So I'm getting in my car with that piece of paper and
Right.
running to their house.
As long as it's not too far away. But I think that's still the biggest fear, is when you have all those closings lined up, 5 in a day or something, and one TRID issue in the middle can
Yeah.
cause a lot of problems.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
anything else that you've seen that you want to share?
You know, it's been going really well, surprisingly. I think that people should be aware of all fees disclosed as we're getting used to this, as the lenders are getting used to it, and the agents alike. There's a lot of fees that we're not aware of, and they're not being put on the estimate. And so it's important to understand that, because you might compete with another lender, and that other lender doesn't have those fees. just because they don't know.
Right.
And so their estimate looks a lot better, and then they get to the closing table and there's problems.
Yeah, I can see how that could happen. So, Trevor, thank you for updating us.
You're welcome.
Glad things are going pretty well in the lending world relative to TRID.
Thanks for having me.
REMAX Boulder Video Podcast, Duane Duggan signing off.